Remember.
Okay, back to analyzing the Bible and how it makes sense even to the common man who is struggling to believe. 66 books were written by over 40 different writers from 3 different continents and 3 different languages.
Okay.
Among these writers are kings, prisoners, soldiers, shepherds, physicians, farmers, tax collectors, passers-by, and different categories of people who don't even know each other or speak the same language. And you put all their books together for over 15 centuries. That's 1500 years. Also consider the fact that many of these guys lived in generations centuries apart and did not even know what some other person had written. So between you and I, how do you connect this scattered puzzle of centuries apart and expect it to make any sense? Now, the last book of the Old Testament was written 400 years before Jesus was even born here on earth.
True.
Yet they all connect together, and then we think it's a coincidence. 400 years before today, none of us here had even existed on earth.
Yeah.
And according to the Guinness World Records, Maria Morera is the oldest person on earth officially from September 2023, and she was born 1907. That's about 117 years today. The oldest person verified to have lived in our own generation is Jane Calment, if I get the name right, and she lived for 121 years. Well, that may be debatable, but my point is that 400 years is a very long time for any man to sustain a fabricated idea. The Bible, the scriptures, has been provided by God for man to know him more, and the validity cannot be questioned if you pay attention. You know, it's high time we realize that the Bible is not a storybook, a novel, or a fairy tale, but a spiritually orchestrated documentation of realities.
Yeah.
From Genesis to Revelation, it talks about only one character, and that's Christ. The entirety of the scriptures evolves around him, and it doesn't end there. Anything and everything, both the thinkable and unthinkable,
That's right.
are properly orchestrated and sustained by Christ as designed by the Father. Colossians 1:16 and 17, of course, one of my favorite verses, reveals that in him all things were created.
Yes.
Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones, dominions, powers, rulers, authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
Sure.
So do I really have a choice when it comes to whom to worship? They made predictions about a Messiah that will come into the world to save. They foretold that the Savior of the world would come, not the Savior of Israel. How did they even know what the circumstances of his birth would be? And how did they know that he was going to ride into Jerusalem with a donkey? How did they know he was going to be betrayed by a friend and even sold for 30 pieces of silver precisely? And that he was going to be crucified with stripes on his body and also with a crown of thorns? And how come hundreds and hundreds of these prophecies have come to pass and are still coming to pass?
True.
Talk to me. Can it be a coincidence?
Of course not.
And interestingly, every human has this uncontrollable desire to know God and worship him. The only problem here is that we refuse to identify Jesus Christ as the way, the truth, and the life, despite having all evidences, even logically. Pharaoh, for instance, saw every sign that human intelligence could catch up with. He knew deep down that the Most High was with the Israelites, yet he failed to conform until he perished in the sea. What about the king in Jericho?
Back?
Emperor Shobak, thank you. He told the Israelites led by Joshua that we have heard about the miracles of your God. He knew about the supremacy of the God of heaven, but chose to embarrass himself. Remember what Rahab told the spies from Israel. We have heard how your God dried up the water of the Red Sea, and how you came out of Egypt. What he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, that's Shion and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. You see, God has revealed himself to every man. It is only left for man to play his own part. Yes, loads of biblical prophecies have been fulfilled accurately, and there are many more set to be fulfilled in the future.
Sure.
I mean, things like our eternal destination. It's just a question of time.
Yes.
Things are going to get clearer. Every man will someday confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So if hundreds of these biblical prophecies have been fulfilled, what is the likelihood, or like some would say, probability, that others that pertain to the future will fail? Yes, I know the Bible is not just a letter or script that can be read in isolation of God's Spirit providing insight.
Yes.
However, even if you choose to check the validity of scriptures from the written word, and you are patient enough to fact check, then you will agree that the Bible can be trusted.
That's right.
One of the key reasons why some unbelievers will tell you the Bible is illogical and doesn't align with scientific principles is primarily laziness.
Yeah.
And that in itself is one of Satan's strategies to block the understanding of man. We've done science and the Bible before, and we can see how science is beginning to align back to a book of over 2,000 years old.
That's right.
Now, laziness can be so negatively effective that it can be responsible for most of our unanswered prayers,
Yes.
because we won't even dare to ask. Jesus recommended, ask the Father in my name and he will give you. But we are waiting for the man of God to lay hands on us, even for simple requests. Now, God's judgment over all rejecting is a key event in the future, based on biblical prophecy.
Sure.
That's why Apostle Paul told the Corinthians, knowing the terror of the Lord we persuade men. But we are well known to God, and I also trust are well known in your consciences.